Lou here. After you guys absolutely loved my Rozen Maiden reviews, I asked at the end of my Troymond video if you guys wanted to hear me review the OVA Ouverture before moving on to the 2013 anime, and you guys wanted to. So, roll the intro and let's get started. Rozen Maiden Ouverture was an OVA released on its own in December 2006. While purchasing the DVD is fairly easy, watching it online with the English dub is not an easy task. For some reason, Ouverture is really difficult to watch online. And I know you guys did say it was easy, but what I mean is a safe way to watch it online. It isn't really a good idea to watch an anime on a suspicious website with hot anime singles in your area. You know, just a fair warning that I will have to show gameplay of Project Diva this time instead of the anime due to the heavy copyright regarding this OVA. Anyway, let's get on with the story. We start showing Suiginto's awakening. I guess the idea here is that Suiginto was accidentally awakened because she was unfinished and Rozen deemed her a failure before making Canaria. She basically crawled to her lower half, and to this day they never explain how she sat up on it. Like, wouldn't she just flop over? And this OVA takes place about halfway through Troymond, pretty much right after Jun became Suisei Seki's medium too. He heads to the doll shop where he sees a beautiful brooch where he plans to buy it for Shinku. She gets upset about it and pretty much hates brooches for some reason. Jun is kind of confused on why Shinku suddenly hates brooches and acting super triggered by it, but he's just overall pissed off. Sousei Seki comes in to tell Jun about why Shinku and Suiginto hate each other so damn much. I mean, she could have just said Shinku hates brooches, but here we are, I guess. We're shown that Shinku and Sousei Seki met in the Victorian era, which contrasts to the manga and the first season where it's shown they all woke up together and they start fighting each other due to the Alice game. Sousei Seki is super out of character here. She starts proclaiming that she'll be Alice and weirdly aggressive, which isn't at all her personality. Meanwhile, Suiginto has been wandering in the Endfield searching for Rozen, which is a pocket universe, by the way. I'll explain more about the Endfield once we get to 2013 because, that's gonna need a lot of lore dumping. We now meet Shinku's earliest medium, Sarah. She's a little girl who's your typical playful little girl in the Victorian era, and Shinku starts wondering about meeting the first doll, if she's still around anyway. Meanwhile, Suisei Seki and Sousei Seki are arguing about the Alice game, which again, super out of character for Sousei Seki when you compare her to the first season. The brooch that's the Chekhov's gun for this OVA, by the way, is just a special brooch that Rozen made just for Shinku because someone was clearly playing favorites. Rozen is probably that one parent who's like, I don't mean to pick favorites, but man, Shinku is definitely my favorite. That's when, surprise, Suiginto appears before Shinku, collapsed onto the ground with a personality that's completely different to the one we see in the first two seasons. She's almost unstable from being incomplete and pretty soft-spoken. She's having a pretty realistic reaction though to something that was abandoned by her creator and the first creation, and this is one thing that's always made Suiginto super interesting. I love that she's been the more realistic reaction if a Rozen Maiden was real, and it's super fascinating to look at. And I will admit that this OVA is at least good at capturing that part. Shinku helps Suiginto learn to walk, which again, I don't know how the hell she's doing that when Suiginto doesn't have a torso. Despite the lack of logical sense in Suiginto even being able to stand, the two of them actually become pretty good friends. They have tea together, they look at the stars, and genuinely enjoy each other's company. Yet apparently Suiginto doesn't know how long it's been or that Rozen yeeted all his dolls, but Shinku keeps up a happy face for her sake. Meanwhile, Enju and Laplace are looking for the Rozen Maidens for some reason. I'm guessing this was back when he was Rozen's apprentice, so maybe he wanted them all together? I have no idea. Suiginto is starting to remember that Shinku was Rozen's favorite and everything else, while the others are telling Shinku not to be friends with Suiginto because of the Alice game. She fights again with Sousei Seki, who again, really unnecessarily aggressive for some reason. That's when Suiginto comes into the fight to timidly announce that she's the first Rozen Maiden, where Sosei attacks Suiginto, where we discover she has no torso. Again. They keep hammering in that she has no torso, and I'm just like, we know! Basically, Suiginto came to life because of her love for Rozen, and had no Rozen Mystica. This means that she's a ticking time bomb to die because she has no soul, basically. Shinku was pretty much only nice to her because of her short lifespan as a doll with no Rozen Mystica, and she just kinda gets absorbed into the floor despite still being alive and kicking? I have no idea what the fuck is happening there, and I guess it's supposed to be sad, but it's kinda more frustrating when this is all actually Sosei's fault for being just generally rude. It's like the writers for this and Troyman really hated Sosei when a large majority of the conflict in this and Troyman is Sosei's fault, and it's like, that's like kind of the opposite of her established character. This is when we get Suiginto's monologue of being a piece of junk because she's unfinished, where she contemplates her existence, and I guess is ready for death when Rozen appears to give her a Rozen Mystica, then yeet. Wait, so you gave her a soul, but not a damn torso? Dude, you had hundreds of body parts, like just grab one. Either Rozen is a sadistic asshole to his dolls, or lost all his brain cells making these dolls. Suiginto meets up with Shinku again, but she's insulting Suiginto because she's incomplete. Suiginto is getting pissed off that everyone keeps calling her incomplete and realizes Shinku kinda looked down on her, so she gets pissed and vows to defeat Shinku. That's when she grabs her brooch and breaks it, claiming that she's not a piece of junk and she'll turn everyone to junk who dare try to deny her existence. So basically Suiginto's character is a yandere for Rozen, rather than an extremely competitive person who has an inferiority complex due to being the first Rozen Maiden doll and wasn't deemed good enough by Rozen. That honestly cheapens her character writing in my opinion. Then Laplace comes to tell them the Alice game is done in that era. And I guess that means only one Alice game can happen every era, then they have to go to sleep and try again in the next. Shit doesn't make any sense, but that's Rozen Maiden fam. As they're going to sleep, they vow they're enemies and absolutely hate each other now. That's how Sosei explains her story and acts like none of it was her fault at all. Jun is more understanding now, but it just ends like there's no "thank you Sosei for telling me and this shit was all your fault." Like it just kind of ends. It's like they ran out of budget to maybe put in another scene of Jun and Shinko apologizing so they can just end it, or maybe even just a line of Sosei, well, now you know. The story is a halfway decent backstory for Shinku and Suiginto's hatred towards each other, and I do feel like some stuff works, but overall it's unnecessarily overly complicated, and everyone is just really out of character. Then again, this is an OVA, and I know some people call into question whether or not an OVA should be seen as canon. I mean, outside of Black Butler anyway. It's just weird, man. Though it is kind of funny that no one writing this bothered to look back at the previous 2 seasons to make sure they were writing something that was consistent. It's like when someone's writing a book as they go and add on new shit that doesn't make any sense when you go back and look at the other books. Overall, it's kind of bad, to be honest. It has like one good element, but that's about it. The animation this time is pretty different. It's a much higher quality version of the original first 2 seasons art style, and I love it. The color palette for this anime is a little poor though. Everything is a lot more natural and grayish tone, which is a shame because Shinku's beautiful red dress is now like mahogany, I guess. Kind of a shame. What I do definitely love is the style. There's this really pretty aspect to the style of these OVAs, where the Rozen Maidens actually look a lot more like dolls now in their facial structure instead of just really tiny little girls. Though just like Troyman, there's some really weird scaling problems yet again. Assuming Rozen Maiden dolls are the same height as a standard 1/3 scale BJD, which is 24 inches, their height flip-flops all over the place. Hell, sometimes they're bigger than 24 inches in some scenes, and other times they're like an 18-inch doll. Like there's this really nicely animated scene of Suiginto crushing a rose, and it's symbolic or whatever, but when you look back at its scaling, it's very confusing. How massive is that rose? How tiny is Suiginto? Especially when you see they're just ordinary roses in Megu's arms, so it's a lot more noticeable and bothersome here. Overall, the art style in this one is really nice. The colors are a little drab, and the scaling is probably the worst out of the Rozen Maiden anime so far. I still think the animation is pretty nice. They're the same opinions as my previous reviews, but what bothers me is how extremely out of character Shinku, Soseiseki, and Suiginto are in this OVA. It's like those fan fictions you read online where everyone is really in character except for the main characters in that fiction. Like you read a Kingdom Hearts fanfiction where Sora, Donald, Goofy, and Kairi are all pretty normal. Then you get to Riku, who acts all like really princely for some reason, and Namine, who talks like a robot for some reason. It's kinda like that. Like, okay, having Suiginto be shy and unstable is interesting to see, and I won't lie that Suiginto and her arc in this OVA is very interesting. But it's also not very good. You know what it is? It's all just really rushed. Like, you can tell they were making this OVA for a quick buck, that they didn't really care about how consistent the characters were. Like, Soseiseki in particular was just really aggressive for no reason. Like, it's implied in the first season she's pretty much nice to everyone and was just blinded by her loyalty for her crazy master. Now it's like she was always really mean to everyone. Not to mention, everyone is just weird for repeating the same arguments for like, what, 200 years? Because everyone in this OVA is having the same arguments they're having in Troymond. So, that's just very strange. Overall, it's the same views I have on the characters, but everyone is also just really out of character here. For a quick thing, by the way, the English dub is the same quality and opinion I have from previous reviews. I do think Suiginto's voice actress was a little hammy here, only because she's way better at being the nasty and bitchy Suiginto we all know and love. But other than that, I think this is a pretty good dub. And that's saying a lot because Sentai Filmworks did this dub, and if you've seen my previous videos, you know I don't exactly hold Sentai Filmworks in the highest regard. Overall, this OVA is just weird. I know they made it to earn a quick buck to try and earn back the money they likely lost because of Troymond, but I feel like it doesn't really work. Like, I can see why this probably didn't sell well, because it's kind of bad. Though it's honestly not as bad as Troymond in my eyes. Like, this was just 2 episodes that were relatively harmless, but Troymond was just a dumpster fire for the most part. The art style is gorgeous, the opening is beautifully done, and Suiginto's arc is decent. But that's about it. The rest is just bad. The characters are forced to do out-of-character actions for the sake of plot. The Chekhov's gun with the brooch is just really underwhelming. And the story is built on weird misunderstandings, which, as I've said many times, I don't like stories built on misunderstanding most of the time. That's it for this quick-ish review of the OVA, though. Let me know down below what you think of this review. Next up is the 2013 anime, and I am so looking forward to that one because I am not a fan of that horribly made 2013 anime. Hey guys, thanks for watching! If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you're new. And if any older new subs would like to help support the channel in any possible way, my Ko-fi page is down below in the description along with all of my social media. For any subscribers, new or old, who would like to help with video ideas or maybe just want to talk about anime or something, then I have a fan server linked down below. See you next time!